Alright, let's continue. So I had just gotten confirmation that my payment was received and someone would be sent out the next day. I started packing all my belongings in my apartment that I would need as I would not be able to return until all of this was completed. I packed about a month's worth of clothes, all my electronics that I would need, all my guns and spy gear that I had bought myself, and a few other miscellaneous items like a toothbrush and shampoo. Once everything was packed up, I went to a friend's house that had an older car for sale that was registered to his name. I asked him if I could trade cars with him for reasons that I couldn't get into, and gave him $2,000 just to keep my car in his backyard and look after it. I figured if this Hitman agency was any good, they'd look up my DMV records and know what kind of car I was driving and my license plate, which would make me a lot easier to find. He agreed and he told me to look after myself and be careful. So I set out back to my old apartment that night to put all the things that I had packed up in the trunk. I also set a little note on my coffee table in the living room that said, "Tag, you're it." Just to fuck with the guy and give him a little heads up that this wasn't just gonna be an average hit. What fun would it be if he didn't even know that this was a fun little game? I now had everything I needed to go on the hunt, and a car that couldn't be traced back to me. Before the day ended, I went to Walmart and picked myself a prepaid smartphone and then dismantled my old phone so I couldn't be tracked via GPS. Before it got too late, I also stopped by the little spy shop again and picked up a magnetic GPS locator. You know, the kind that Walk and Hank from Breaking Bad put under Gus Figge's car to follow him. After that, I was fully ready to do this. No turning back now. I went back to the area around my apartment around 11 p.m. and parked about 2/3 of a mile away to wait. No way I could stay the night there and allow the guy to get the drop on me while I was sleeping. I sat on the passenger side of the car to make it look like I was waiting for a friend to come back and to not freak out the people who lived in the apartments that I was in front of. They said they'd be sending him out the next day, so I had to sleep in the car and wait for him to arrive. I went to sleep around midnight and woke up at around 7 a.m. I took out my nice deer hunting binoculars and waited, and waited, and waited. I finally got hungry enough to convince myself I needed to eat, so I went in this little fast food joint and picked up a few burgers. I went back and parked in the same spot I was before. It was around 5 p.m. at this time, and I figured the guy wasn't gonna come during the day, so I fucked around on Reddit for a few hours until it got dark. I finally got bored of Reddit and I went back to watching my apartment. Around 10 p.m., I watched an all-black car with dark tinted windows. I think it was a Chrysler 300, pulled up a few hundred feet from my apartment on the other side of the street. It looked a bit fishy on account that it had out-of-state plate numbers. I'd never seen it in my neighborhood before, so I started to watch it. It just sat there for about 10 minutes, presumably checking out the house, then it drove away. Huh, that was weird, I thought to myself as I had the biggest grin on my face. I knew this was my guy. I tried to sleep that night and maybe got a few hours in around 1 o'clock, but I was so excited with anticipation that I couldn't get a full night's rest. I woke up around 3:30 a.m. to check everything out, so I started fucking around on Reddit again to pass the time. Around 4 a.m., the same black car pulled up at the very same spot it was before. About 2 to 3 minutes of waiting there, the lights shut off and a man got out. He was a bigger guy, around my height, about 6 feet, but way bigger muscle-wise. Dude could definitely beat the shit out of me in close quarters combat, so I knew I couldn't let that happen. The guy was also dressed in a really nice suit. What a fucking stereotypical hitman, I thought to myself. I noticed I had the biggest grin on my face again. I felt so alive. The man walked across the street and sure enough went up to my apartment. He took a key out of his pocket, put it in the lock and slammed it with a small metal brick thing. It was a bump key. He then entered my apartment and shut the door behind him. About 30 seconds after he did that, I used the binoculars to focus on his license plate and wrote down the number. After about 5 minutes, he came out and put something in his pocket. I'm pretty sure it was his gun. He also had something else crumbled up in his other hand. He threw it in the gutter, got back in his car, and drove off. I waited about an hour and went to go see what he threw out. Sure enough, it was the "Tag, you're it" note I left him. I started laughing hysterically and knew this was gonna be a lot more fun than I could ever hope for. I went back to my car and tried to catch a few more hours of sleep. When I awoke, the sun was already up. It was around 8 a.m. I drove off to another one of my buddy's house who worked for the DMV to get some info from him. He wasn't there, so I went to work to find him. After about 15 minutes, he was in between helping people, and I walked up to his counter. He was surprised to see me and greeted me with a, "What's up, man?" I sat down without saying anything to him and slipped him the piece of paper with the license plate number on it. "What's this?" he asked. I just looked at him and said, "Don't ask questions. I need the info of the person who these plates belong to." "Dude, I can't give you that information. I could get into a lot of trouble." I pulled out $200 from my wallet and slipped it to him and said, "Please, dude, this is really important. This guy wants to kill me and I need this information. My life depends on it. Here's $200. I know you and your wife have been hurting for money." He looked at me with a really serious look and muttered under his breath, "Fuck, man." He took the money and put it in his pocket and started typing on his computer. He then got up from his chair and told me he'd be right back. About a minute later, he came back with a few sheets of paper. "This is everything I could get on the guy." I looked at him again with a really serious face and said, "Don't mention this to anyone, even your wife. This guy is really dangerous and I don't need you getting involved. And make sure no one can trace back the fact that you looked up this information." He looked back at me and said, "Okay." As I was getting up to leave, he said, "Take care of yourself, man, and be careful." I told him that I would, and that I couldn't thank him enough. I walked back to my car and started studying the piece of paper, and once again, I had a huge grin on my face. I now had a bunch of this guy's info on my hands. I knew who I was dealing with. I'm not disclosing the man's name due to concerns for myself and his family, so we'll just refer to him as Mike. Mike was 35 years old and registered to an address in Arizona. Like I thought, it was a black Chrysler 300. Now that I had the info that I needed, it was time to stake out my house a bit more. When I got back, it was around 1 p.m., and I parked a bit further away this time. I sat in my car for another hour, and when 2 p.m. rolled around, I saw the same black 300 roll up about 2 blocks away from my place again. Further away than last time, but close enough to watch the place thoroughly. I was only about a mile away from him and he didn't even know it.